Okay, sorry, this is getting a little bit long. Takes forever to get through all these activities, huh? But part 4 of activities you can use with any grammar point is hurricane. I actually mentioned this back in a previous video when I was talking about feedback games, it's kind of like its own thing in itself. Like you can use it as a feedback game or you can use it to practice the grammar point. So, hurricane is you draw a grid on the board. Now, this is my copy. This is the teacher's answer sheet. The students actually can't see this. What the students see is a blank grid, which, sorry, I neglected to draw this before. But let me just quickly kind of jot something down here. So I just would draw this on the board for the students. So all they can see is a blank grid. So they would have to choose like A3 or C2 or D5 without seeing what's inside it. I have the answer key here, which tells me what is hidden in each box. Now, most of them are just questions. Now, in this example, it's relative clauses. So they get 2 sentences. A doctor is a person. A doctor helps sick people. They have to use a relative pronoun to make the clause. A doctor is a person who helps sick people. You could have any sort of kind of grammar question here for any sort of grammar point, some sort of control practice. Again, kind of fill in the blank, unscramble the sentences, correct or incorrect, any sort of question to test their grammar knowledge. But then you also put in little surprises throughout it. There's arrows in which they change points with another team. There's kind of plus 200 bonus points. There's hurricane, where they lose all their points. There's rocket, where either they can steal all the points from another team, or they can destroy all the points from another team. And that's all I have on this particular board. But teachers are known to get creative and add in all kind of interesting or ridiculous things here, like steal a teammate from another team, or you have to give 3 of your points to another team, or you can steal 50 points from another team, or the imagination is the limit. You can think of kind of any little surprises you want here. I also kind of make this into a betting game as well, although you don't have to. So each team starts off with like 10 points, and before they hear the question, they bet how many points they want to bet on that square. And then if they get the question right, they can double their bet. If they get the question wrong, they lose their bet. And if it turns out to be an arrow or a hurricane or some other thing, then the bet just becomes irrelevant. Okay, moving on. Next is jump the line. This is something that at my school is mostly used with kids classes, particularly little kids classes, but it's something that you could use all the way up. I've used it with adults and it's worked okay. You know, sometimes adults need to get out of their seats and kind of stop them from falling asleep. So basically what it is you have a line drawn down the middle of the floor. Students stand on the line and you give them some sort of a prompt, and they either jump right or jump left. Okay, examples. So this could be used with contrasting grammar points. For example, you could give them a sentence with a blank in it. If the verb is present simple, they jump right. If the verb is present continuous, they jump left. Or I've used this game with kind of beginning students to contrast do or does. So I have a sentence like, you like swimming? And because the answer is do, they have to jump left for do. But if it was, he likes soccer, then they'd have to jump right for does. I've also used this for in and on with adult students. So kind of, prepositions like, so in, on, and at, I think. So at, no, you can't use it for 3. You only have 2 because they jump right or left. I think I've used it for at or on. So like in September, on January 1st. And they have to kind of jump for on or in. Sorry, I'm making a mess out of this. But yeah, you can use it for on or in, contrasting. Now, if you don't have any contrasts, you can use jump the line for correct or incorrect. So show them a sentence. If the sentence is correct, they all jump right. If it's wrong, they all jump left. Little kids are often just happy jumping for the sake of jumping. You don't need to add anything to it. But you could make it more interesting. You could say, if you jump the wrong direction, you have to sit down. Or you have to say, instead of jump the line, you have to run to the opposite wall. And you could say the last person to touch the wall loses a point or has to sit down. Or something like that to make it more competitive. Variation is throw the ball. So you have like one target on the right and one target on the left. Again, you can use this for contrasting points like do versus does, or you can just use it for correct or incorrect, and they kind of have to throw the ball at the appropriate target. Or maybe you have just 2 different buckets on different sides of the room. They have to throw the ball in the bucket. Yeah. Just anything like that, you can have throw the ball. Okay, next one, Kaboom. So at my school, I think Kaboom was a computer program on the Active Inspire software that somebody else kind of made. The students, there was a bunch of different words. The students would kind of pick a number. The number would show them a word. They would have to make a sentence using the target grammar with that word, and the first team to do it would get a point. But if they picked one that said kaboom, then it was like a bomb, and they lost all their points. You can do it low tech as well. So for example, here's read, draw, fly. This is kind of pictures because it's low-level students. So you cut it up along the lines, and then you would kind of fold it on the line. And then you'd have all of these lying on the floor. And the student would unfold it, see what the picture is, make a sentence in the target grammar, like in this case, he is reading. And then the first team to do it can get a point, or all the teams who make a sentence can get a point. And then 3 of them, kind of folded up, so you don't know which 3 they are the bombs. And these are kind of mixed in with the other ones. And if you get the bomb, you lose all your points. Okay, next one, making progress. Next one is a memory game. Now, again, this is something where you have to split the grammar point into 2 different halves. Either corresponding sentences, active, passive, or in this case, it's if result. So if I were a dog, I would chase cats all day. If I have money, I will buy you something. So this game is known by different names depending on where you grow up. It's called concentration. It's also called something completely different in Britain, which Pelmanism. I think it's called Pelmanism in Britain. So you cut up the cards, you put them all face down, maybe in a grid. I like to put them in a grid. Some people like to mess them all up. You turn over one card. You have to find the matching card. If you don't get a match, then you have to turn both cards over. And the idea is you try and remember where each card is located and try and get a match. If you play it just purely as a memory game, it's more of a receptive game. or not even that, I guess maybe more of a noticing game. They're just kind of getting exposed to the target grammar. To make it kind of more productive, the students have to kind of predict what the answer will be. So if you turn over, if I were a dog, you have to predict what the result clause would be before you get a chance to kind of find it. Traditionally in these games, if you get a match, that means you get to go again. I will usually play it maybe once as a whole class, and then I'll try and make enough copies so that we have multiple sets, and then we break into small groups for kind of the second round. Speaking of a whole class game, sometimes if you're trying to demonstrate this as a whole class, particularly if you have a large class, it's a little bit difficult to get kind of everyone around to see the cards. So what I'll typically do in these cases is on the whiteboard just write numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then those numbers match with the answer key I have. So this is for reported speech. They've got to match the direct speech with the reported speech. So number 1 is I like chocolate, which matches with, where is it? Where is it? Somewhere here. Here we go. He said that he liked chocolate. So these two are the matching sentences. If they say number 1, I just read it. They have to listen. They can't see it. And then they will say another number, and I'll read out the next sentence. So they're just kind of listening and remembering what the numbers correspond to. You could also, I've done this as a combination of kind of numbers on the board and cards. So like there's cards on the table which also match to the numbers on the board. So you pick up a card and then you try and remember which number on the board that card matches with. I've done this with irregular verbs, kind of matching the past simple to the present simple with irregular verbs. Okay, next one. Next one is PowerPoint games. Now, these were very popular at my school. I think as happens in a lot of staff rooms, it was one person who got really into them and downloaded a bunch of them into her folder, and then everyone started borrowing them from her, and then they just kind of spread like wildflower. These require a lot of work to make, but there are a bunch of pre-made ones already made, which you can find on the internet, teachers' forums and stuff like that, where somebody has made a template, and you can just borrow the template that somebody made, and you can plug in your own grammar to it. So at my school, popular ones are there's a Pokemon PowerPoint game, there's a Doraemon PowerPoint game, a Naruto PowerPoint game. There are actually, I don't know how many different varieties. There's probably a PowerPoint game for anything you can imagine. So usually the way they work is they start off with a menu, and whoever's made these has kind of done all the linking. So it will have like the alphabet, and the students will say A, and you'll click on A. And A will take you directly to one slide, and there'll be a question, and then the students will give an answer, and then you reveal the answer, and if they get it right, you click on the left icon, and if they get it wrong, you click on the right icon, and the right one will take you to some sort of prize, the wrong one takes you back to the beginning. I know it sounds maybe complicated, but it's all basically done for you. I think a lot of these originated in South Korea, but a lot of them are English only, so they kind of work well with kind of any country where you're teaching English. So yeah, they're great if you can find them. Okay, next, report a sentence. This one's actually not one of mine. A colleague shared it at one of the workshops I did where we had an idea sharing. I wrote it down here not because it's a great activity, but because it's just kind of so simple. So I just thought, oh yeah, I'll throw that in there. Basically, all the students stand up. You say a sentence in the target language. If they think they can repeat it back to you exactly, then they raise their hand, repeat it back to you exactly. If they say it back to you exactly, they get to sit down. And then the idea is that you don't want to be the last person standing. So you try and raise your hand, repeat the sentence exactly. If you say anything wrong, then you have to keep standing. My colleague really liked that game. So apparently it worked very well for him. And it's, nice, simple, no prep. So I don't know. Okay. Speaking of no prep, this next one is completely the opposite of it. This one is tons of prep. But sometimes it can be kind of fun. This is Scrambled Sentences. So you can do this with any grammar point, but these are sentences using the present perfect. I have played soccer for 8 years. I played basketball yesterday. Sorry. Contrasting the present perfect with the past simple for this one. But it can work with any grammar point. So they're all on different cards, and before class, I cut all these cards up. Takes me ages to cut them all up. Actually, that's not true. I'm getting quicker with the paper cutter, getting more efficient on this. Doesn't take me as long anymore. It takes a little bit of time. So, students work in pairs or groups of 3. Each pair, I give them a blank grid, and I give them a stack of cards, which I have cut up and shuffled, and I give them a glue stick. And they have to kind of arrange the cards on the grid to make sentences, and kind of glue them down, and I kind of walk around and check as they're doing it. Kids love this. It works really well with kind of 7, 8-year-olds, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. But I've used it really for all ages, and as long as, it works for adults. They don't like to do it every lesson, but every kind of once in a while, it's fun for them. Okay, next, scrambled story. So you either find some sort of simple story using the target point, or you create some sort of simple story using the target language point, and you put it on strips, cut them out, shuffle them, and the students have to sort of unscramble the story so that it makes sense. This is for first conditional. This is a adapted version of the children's story, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, which I've rewritten slightly to emphasize the first conditional. So if you give a mouse a cookie, he will ask for a glass of milk. If you give him the milk, he will probably ask you for a straw. When he is finished, he will ask you for a napkin. If you give him a napkin, then he will want to look in the mirror to make sure he doesn't have a milk mustache, etc. So all of these are cut out and scrambled, and this, all using the first conditional. Students have to put these in order. I've used these for loads of stuff. I've written some of my own awful stories. I did, I think, Town Mouse and Country Mouse using the past passive. I did Goldilocks and the Three Bears, which I kind of rewrote to overemphasize too much, too little, and not enough. You can kind of create, I've done kind of dialogues, which I've kind of cut up and scrambled using target language points. Yeah, just whatever you can think of, you can do. Okay, next. Sentence battleships. Now this is another one that's not one of mine. Colleague presented it at a workshop. He really liked it. I've never used it, but apparently it worked really well in his class. It's like the classic game of Battleship, which if you've never played it, it's a grid game. So you and your opponent have battleships which you hide on a grid. You can't see your opponent's grid, but you call out grid numbers like A14, Z28, assuming it goes all the way up to Z. And he says, no, that's a miss, or yes, you've hit. It's a hit. And if you kind of, in the real game, you're trying to sink battleships. In this game, you have sort of a battleship type grid. You have to create the grid. So kind of numbers going one way, letters going the other, or vice versa. And you have some sort of sentence using the target language. So for example, present perfect. I have been to China. You write each word of the sentence at a different place on the grid. So I goes in like A14. Have goes in like C26. Your partner tries to guess, just like Battleship, they try and guess where you've hit it on the grid. So they'll say like C15, and you'll say like miss, or if you have a word there, you say hit, and then the word is have. And your partner tries to guess your sentence before you can guess his sentence. And whoever guesses the opposing sentence first is the winner. I've never used it. My colleague really liked that game. Okay, next. Silly sentences. Now this one, you either on the whiteboard or on the PowerPoint or whatever, you would have like a circle, a triangle, and a square. Like this. The order is not important. It could just as easily be a square, triangle, circle, or triangle, circle, square, or whatever. In one of them, you write the number of words in the sentence. And the next one, you write the verb. So for example, eat, and then maybe an object like pizza. And so they have to make a sentence with 9 words exactly using eat and pizza and whatever the target grammar of the day is, either present perfect or past perfect or present continuous or whatever. Now this isn't very silly. Sorry, I couldn't think of anything. But traditionally teachers kind of make very silly sentences here, have a bit of fun with it. And the first team to write a sentence using 9 words exactly would get the point. The students are playing in kind of teams of 2 or 3. Okay, next, songs. Songs are great in the ESL classroom, and just about any grammar point you can think of, there's a song out there somewhere that has that grammar point in there somewhere. It's just a matter of finding that song. Right, so how to find it? I think if you search for this on the web, other English teachers have already done your work for you. There's just tons of research out there. So just search song using present perfect, song using used to. And some English teachers blog out there, or some kind of worksheet sharing website has already got a song already flagged for you and maybe even a worksheet for it. So just, if the song doesn't automatically come to mind, just search Google for it. Now, you've got the song. What do you do with it? Oh, well, there's a million things you could do with it. I once went to a workshop where the whole 40 minutes was just on different activities you could use with songs. So the easiest thing, the most obvious thing is just to create a gap fill. So this is you don't own me. Use this for a lesson on negative verbs. So you don't own, I'm not, don't say, can't go, don't tell, don't put, don't tie, etc. I just blanked out all the negative verbs, played the song for them, and they wrote in the answers. You could also kind of scramble the song, and they have to unscramble the sentences. You could, I don't know. There's a million things. I don't want to get bogged down in this. So I'm just going to say fill in the blanks or scramble or whatever. Lots of things you can do with the song. Okay, next one is sorting activity. This one's not so exciting on the face of it, but it's a classic. You give them a bunch of sentences. They have to sort them into 2 categories. I think traditionally the way you do this is you don't tell them what the categories are. So it's kind of a noticing activity. It works best if you're contrasting two different grammar points. So this one is contrasting present perfect with past simple. Give them a whole bunch of sentences. They put them into two different categories, and then they kind of notice what the difference is. In this case, trying to get them to notice the different time expressions that go with each one. Okay. We're getting near the end. We're almost there. Next one. This is another one I got from a colleague. It's not so much a game, but it's an interesting idea, is that whenever you have a grammar point, usually there's a part at the beginning of class where the teacher kind of stands up and kind of explains, okay, this is the rule, this is what it means, here's a timeline, this is where we are now, this is in the past. So, something continuous that happens in the past. The teacher is explaining all of it. The idea here is to get the students to explain it, which you can do kind of, I guess, two different categories. One category is a grammar point that the students are already familiar with. So, of course, if you teach ESL, you know that the textbooks like to recycle grammar points. They study the past continuous in the elementary textbook, but then they study it again in the pre-intermediate book, and then they study it again in the intermediate book, and each time it's kind of like refreshing and adding some layers of complexity, but they know it. They know it in theory. They don't use it, but they know it. So for this one, you can just say, okay, guys, we're studying the present perfect today. Why don't you tell me about it? I'll give you a few minutes. You can kind of plan in your groups, and then you stand up and tell me all about the grammar point. You can also use it for a completely new grammar point, something the students haven't studied before. But in this case, it works better as homework. So you can say to them, okay, guys, next week we're going to be studying the past perfect. Look ahead in your book, read all the rules, and then this group will present the rules to the rest of the class. So it's a way of getting kind of the students to do your job, and it's better for the students that way anyways. Okay, next one, Tic-Tac-Toe. This is kind of more lexical than grammar, but it can, actually this can work with grammar. This is another thing I got from a colleague. You write up a tic-tac-toe board. I think in Britain they call this knots and crosses. And you have a word in each one. In this example here, the example is prepositions. So it's in, on, up, out, off, down, to, over, away. It's kind of vocabulary, it's kind of grammar at the same time. Students are playing tic-tac-toe, knots and crosses, but in order to put their cross or their O, they have to make a sentence using this grammar, using this word. You can adjust it to any grammar point if you just put in generic verbs, and they have to make a sentence using that verb, using the target language of the day, and then they can put in their X's and their O's. Okay. I think I've got one last one, but I'll tell you what, why don't we just finish here, huh? 4 videos is enough. I'm not going to make one last video just for the last one. We'll finish here.